What are ghastly handsome Flins' biggest pros and cons? That's what I'm here to tell you today. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. Without a shadow of a doubt, the first amazing thing about Flins is that he is going to be an absolute king when it comes to Electrocharged. He's the premier Electrocharged DPS. So if you're an EC fan that's been waiting for a dedicated Electrocharged DPS to come out for a while now, well then today is your lucky day, because that is exactly what Flins specializes in. More specifically, he specializes in Lunar Electrocharged. This is a new type of EC that's able to crit. Because he's an Electrocharged character, it's basically guaranteed that his AoE is going to be at least semi-decent. And he's all around going to be the premier best way to play this reaction. Now I will add, you do ideally really want Ineffa on his team in order to reach his max potential, and this is something that we're going to touch on in more detail later, but for now, do know that if you have all of his necessary tools, then you are going to be impressed with his EC performance. Notcry is going to have a very big emphasis on these lunar reactions. Since we already have Ineffa out, we can look forward to Flins completing the Lunar Electrocharge team, as he's an on-field DPS that is completely dedicated to it. His gameplay is also unique considering that he features two bursts, his larger burst and then his mini burst. And this is definitely going to feel far different from all the regular EC teams that you've played before. So if that's something that you're interested in, then you should definitely consider checking out Flins. I'd also like to talk about how smooth his gameplay seems in general. Stygian Onslaught is something that we have to consider now, and Flins is actually going to feel pretty decent there, because he doesn't really require a lot of energy to start off his rotation. This is because, after you've set up all of your teammates, by the time you swap to Flins, he's going to have enough energy to cast his mini burst, thus allowing you to start his rotation very smoothly in the game mode, which offers you no energy to begin with. Now because of his energy consumption mechanics, his energy recharge requirements are going to be on the slightly higher end for a main DPS, but if you're able to reach those, then the actual gameplay experience itself is going to feel very smooth, and very well adapted to the type of endgame content that we currently have in Genshin. It's nice compared to characters like Navia or Bennett for example, who would ideally really want their burst at the start of a rotation. Another positive aspect of Flins is that his rotation appears to be very fast. This means that his actual DPS is honestly going to be very high. Also, let's just say it how it is. His gameplay looks really cool. I'm gonna have to pull my all to skip this guy. I'm trying to save for Varka, but god, his gameplay is really good looking. I literally cannot deny that, not even a little bit. But anyways, going back to a more objective standpoint, his gameplay is very unique and he definitely offers a very distinct way to play Electrocharged. And he certainly seems like a fun first DPS to give us a look into lunar reactions. Another really nice thing about Flins is that outside of really wanting Ineffa, he's actually quite cheap. Because of his want for Ineffa, I'm going to say that he's decently accessible. I don't want to say really accessible, because if you didn't get the robot, we'll get onto that later, but it is a little bit rough. However, outside of that, he's honestly not that hard to get going. For starters, he's going to be getting a good craftable weapon in Notcry. This was expected, since not long characters all also got really good craftable weapon options. And whenever the region first came out, it was pretty obvious which weapon was going to be for who. Well, Notcry's putting us in a similar situation, and Flins in Steel is going to have a pretty good craftable weapon option for himself. So if you're worried that you don't have a good free-to-play friendly weapon option for him, well then don't worry, that's going to be sorted out for you just fine. And outside of that, consider his two other teammates that aren't Ineffa. They are dirt cheap. Now the thing is with Flins, you do want to play him with at least one other Notcry character, because the Notcry artifact sets demand it. However, everybody's going to be having access to Ino. So that completely solves that problem, and you can easily stick Ino on a Favonius Lance and generate more energy for Flins, thus making his gameplay loop even smoother. So that's a cheap option that everybody's going to be able to enjoy. And the fun doesn't stop there, because you know who else he's able to use very effectively? Sucrose. Yes, this is a situation in which you definitively really want to use Sucrose, and this is because of her EM share. So we live in a timeline in which Sucrose is actually an ideal option. Obviously, she's always been a very good character, but this is a situation in which she is best in slot. Also, if you have an Ineffa on your team, then that actually counts as one of your Notcry characters in order to proc the Notcry sets, meaning that you don't actually have to use Ino if you don't want to. You're also able to use Burstless Lady Farina. That's right, our dearest Hydro Archon strikes again. Now the only thing is, her damage bonus percent buffs are kind of wasted in this team, simply because they're not really going to be doing anything for Lunar Electrocharged. I see you, Hoyoverse. You're trying to get Lady Farina out of the meta, aren't you? Well, unfortunately for them, and fortunately for us, their plans have yet again been foiled by our dearest Hydro Archon. Because even if her burst is just kinda useless in this team, you can still very much enjoy her Hydro application from her three little guys. Now if your Lady Farina is C0 with a Favonius sword, then she's not going to be doing that much personal damage, but at least it's still there. And if you have her with any more level of investment, then her personal damage is actually going to be pretty good. Basically everybody under the sun owns Farina at this stage, so that's another nice accessible option that you can consider, but if she's already being taken up by another team, or you don't have her, well then once again, you can get away with using Ino. So all things considered, he has decent accessibility. However, note that I said decent accessibility, because it's now time to talk about Flins' cons. He really wants Ineffa. It's even worse than Kinich really wanting Emily. He genuinely wants Ineffa the way that we as humans need water, food, and primo gems. Without Ineffa, you're dealing with a huge drop-off in damage, and whoever your 4th slot is just not going to be doing anything in comparison to what Ineffa would be able to do. You can slot somebody like Fischl or Autodon there, but it's just not going to be anywhere near as good. And honestly, it's so bad to the point where I just really wouldn't pull Flins if you don't have Ineffa. You can force it to work. You can. I understand. He's very attractive. Super handsome dude. I totally get why you would want him if you don't have Ineffa. And honestly, go for it if you really love him. But just keep in mind that it is going to be rough. And you're definitely not going to be clearing higher stages of Stygian Onslaught if you don't have his best installed team. Now when it comes to Spiral Abyss, we'll see. I believe that during his shill period, he'll probably be fine without Ineffa, because it's going to be a boss that's designed for him likely, or maybe the Abyss Blessing is going to be really good for him, something along those lines. However, further down the line, whenever he's not being shielded anymore, it's gonna be rough. He'll obviously be fine in Imaginarium Theater, but everyone is fine in Imaginarium Theater. But either way, I just really have to drive home the point that he is definitely losing out on a ton of damage if you don't have Ineffa. And not only that, but Ineffa is one of his few genuinely good defensive options, because she's able to provide shields as well. He misses out on so much by not having the robot by his side. If you're somebody that's just starting the game for Flins, or perhaps you're coming back after a long time for him and you missed out on an Ineffa, obviously get the character if you still really like him. Just keep in mind that from a meta standpoint, it's definitely going to be a rough investment. I will say there is a way to cope with it though. If you get C1R1 on him, then you can at least manage until you get an Ineffa on rerun. However, if you're getting only C0R0 or C0R1, then it's gonna be a bit rough without the robot. I'm just being completely honest. This is just as bad as Skirk wanting Escoffier, if not even worse than that. Kind of disappointing if I'm being completely honest, especially considering that Mualani was the first Notlum release and she did not have restrictiveness this bad. It's also why I don't want to outright say that Flins is a very accessible unit, because it's super hard to call him accessible when this is the situation. And another thing is that while his other teammates are cheaper, or they're more accessible, or they're more widely owned, he still does limit himself in other ways, namely through having a fast rotation. He wants characters that have shorter cooldowns. This is why characters such as Burstless Farina and Ino are going to be good for him. However, this means that other characters, such as Yulan and Xingqiu, aren't really going to be anywhere near as good for him. And both of those are also quite universally owned characters that people like to slot in very often, so unfortunately, while he does have more accessible options, if you don't like playing those characters, well then it's gonna be a little bit rough, because those are his options. Another thing is that while his actual gameplay is going to be quite comfortable in Stygian Onslaught, he does still want more ER built on him than the average DPS, especially if you're not pulling for a signature weapon. This isn't that big of a deal, especially if you build your Ino on Favonius, however it's still something to consider at the end of the day. His team is also just going to generally have higher energy requirements. This is because of how quickly he rotates, so you have less time to generate energy particles. All around, I think that Flins is a really cool first Nod Cry character, and I really like his aesthetics. I think design-wise, he's probably the second best looking Nod Cry character. Number one is definitely Varka, and I'm also so excited that Varka's Japanese voice actor is Joseph Joestar. That's so crazy, I can't believe it that's the case, oh my god. Anyways, that aside, back to Flins. I do really like his design and aesthetics, his animations are incredible. Honestly, I might just have to swipe to run around as him and explore Not Cry as him, because he just looks that good, dude. It's gonna be hard skipping. Honestly, I can't even say for certain if I'm skipping or not, we'll see. We'll see. But regardless, I do think that he's a really cool character kit-wise, and I do like the idea of lunar reactions, but I really don't like that he's so bad if you don't have an Ineffa. Don't get me wrong, it's not the first time we've seen this. Kinich really wants Emily, but the thing is, I feel like you can still play other 4th slot teammates on Deepwood, and you're still gonna get by just fine. It's obviously not gonna be as good, but it still works. Skirk was an ever case of either get a scope VA or your unit's just kind of cooked. And I really hope they don't continue in this direction. It's kind of disappointing because there are a lot of situations in which somebody is just not going to have an Ineffa. And it's fine to have a premium option. I have no problem with premium options, but this is a very, very big increase. Aside from that particular disappointment regarding him, he looks great in basically every other aspect, and I love the look of his gameplay. I'm excited. I might be getting my hands on him. You'll see on Notcry release if I pull for him or not. I'll definitely be posting a video if I pull for him. But either way, I'm really excited for Notcry. Looks so good, man. Alright. Hopefully this video was able to tell you Flins' biggest pros and cons. This has been Juice, signing out. And if you pull for Flins and Steel, then perhaps you'll even be able to go to the Nether.